Thank you ever so much, Madam Deputy Speaker. And can I wholeheartedly congratulate my honourable friend for introducing this vital and critical bill this morning. And can I also commend him for the diplomatic and charming way that he always introduces these debates to the House. And I think that he was very generous in taking so many points of view this morning. And just before I make my substantial points, Madam Deputy Speaker, I just want to say a little bit about the tone of this House today, because what we used to do when it was the Conservatives that sat across there who spoke consistently about Scotland and all the issues to do with devolved government, we collected them, we stored them away, and we used them against them. They're gone. Utterly and totally gone. When they get up to their feet and speak Scotland down the way that they have this morning, we are collecting, collating, keeping them to use back against them. And I'll just say ever so gently to my honourable friends across the side, have a look at that by-election result last night. It was absolutely damning for the Labour Party. So whatever they're doing in terms of this new attack line against the Scottish Government, it is singularly failing. It will fail them in the way that it failed the Conservatives. And I caution them, do not try and use this House against the Scottish Parliament. It didn't work for them, and it won't work for them. So I would just say that as a little bit of caution as we continue with this debate today. But today, it's about this bill. Madam Deputy Speaker, we're in trouble. We're in real trouble in Scotland, and this is why this bill is absolutely critical. There can be no doubt whatsoever that Scotland is at the early stages of a population and demography crisis that is only going to get worse, a lot worse, unless we do something. Hear, hear. And something we must do, because we cannot leave it in its current condition as it is just now. With our falling birth rate, we are now at the stage where we have too few working-age people available to look after an ever-increasing older population. Already in these early stages of population stagnation, we're seeing the impacts and the effects. We only need to look at our health service to see the difficulties we have in the recruitment of staff. When we look at our social care sector, we're approaching something like a workforce crisis. And I appeal to people, don't go and look at the nuclear subs in Clydebank, but go to the rural areas of Scotland. And what they will find in rural areas in places like mine is hospitality and tourism businesses cutting back hours or closing. And they're doing that because they do not have access to the staff that they require to keep themselves properly functioning and organised.
I'm somewhat confused by the honourable gentleman's speech, because he started off by accusing people on this side of the House of talking Scotland down, and then he tells us that Scotland is in a crisis. One wonders who's been in government in that time, and continued in his peroration to say that they're an ageing society. I wonder if at some point he'll take some sort of responsibility, and maybe he'd also reflect that the independent Scotland of which he dreams, he seems to be talking down himself.
Well, I think I'm almost grateful for the intervention, confused and clumsy as it was, because what I've got for the honourable gentleman is a solution. And what we need to get into the territory just now, when we're facing a crisis as we are solutions. And what my honourable friend has offered by the start of a conversation about this is a way forward for us to be able to deal with the particular and distinct issues that we are facing in Scotland just now. Now, Scotland's not unique. This is happening throughout the whole of the Western industrialised world. We're facing issues because birth rates across the world are falling. And they're not just falling, they're calamitously falling. And every nation is needing to do something about the issues and conditions that they find themselves in. What we're asking for today is a Scottish response to a distinct and particular range of issues and circumstances that we're dealing with. Because we've got it bad. We've got it really, really bad because our issues with the falling birth rate have been exacerbated. Now, it's not been exacerbated because anything that the Scottish Government's doing, even though the honourable ladies and gentlemen would like to suggest that's the case. It's exacerbated because of what my honourable friend said about Brexit. Brexit has killed our population sustainability and population growth. Yes, I'll go.
I thank the honourable member for giving way. You talked about the consequences of Brexit, and one of those such consequences is that we've seen record soaring net migration rates across the UK, but they're disproportionately not coming to Scotland. Have you looked at how you can attract such immigrants and migrants to Scotland without blaming Westminster?
I wondered how long it would take to get to this point because it is utter bunkum and rubbish. This suggestion that started by the Conservatives but now seems to be readily picked up by the Labour Party that somehow we are not able to attract people from the rest of the United Kingdom to come to Scotland. Utter rubbish. It is at a record high. And why doesn't she look at the report from the National Records of Scotland, which will tell her that? We have the highest net migration to Scotland from the rest of the United Kingdom than we ever have had. Now, she's shaking her head. She's obviously not read, and I extol her to read this, because for too long this nonsense has been allowed to take hold, and it cannot continue any longer. We have record net migration from the rest of the United Kingdom. And believe me, Madam Deputy Speaker, we don't get depressed about that. We don't think that's a bad thing. We think this is a positive. We think this is a good thing. And we encourage people to come to Scotland, unlike them, who discourage people from coming to the United Kingdom, who do everything possible to put up barriers, to make life as difficult and miserable for people who are trying to come to the shores of the United Kingdom. We are the exact opposite in Scotland. Scotland is not full up, and we need people to come to our country, and I welcome anybody from the rest of the United Kingdom who wants to come to a beautiful place, a fantastic country to live in. Come to Scotland. I challenge one of them to say to the rest of the world, come to the United Kingdom, because that is not in their cultural and political DNA. Now, Madam Deputy Speaker, we are in a difficult situation now. The simple fact is that Scotland needs more working age people to refresh our population. And if we do not get that, we are going to be in serious trouble. Now, this is happening all around the world just now. But what this government is doing with this Brexit is getting in the way and making our issues worse. And you know something else that they're doing? They are, with their falling birth rate, they are actually trying to suppress our birth rate by the social engineering use of the benefits system to deny benefits to working class parties who are seeking to have large families at the very point where we should be doing everything to encourage more children. They are actively trying to suppress it through social engineering using the benefit system. And I want to hear the honourable gentleman defend that policy when we have a crisis in Scotland.
I want to hear it 18 years of SNP government in Holyrood that has failed on all of the issues that is mentioned there today. And there's a broader point here. There is a broader point here about nationalism, which is we've got to keep the circus on the road, we've got to keep telling people online, and this is the latest in a string of things that keeps people from talking about the SNP failure.
I've got no idea what they're doing, but what we're trying to offer here is solutions. We've identified a range of difficulties that we have in the nation. It is right and proper that they're addressed, that looked at, examined and analysed. And then what we get down to is the business of fixing them out. That is what we're doing today. This government is making our situation and condition 10 times worse by their inept, clumsy, callous and heinous attempt to socially engineer the benefits system to suppress our birth rate at the very time when we need more children. We need larger families. Now, all round Europe, countries are facing the same range of issues. What are they doing? They're not having a two-child benefit cap. They're incentivising young people to have children. They are giving tax breaks. They are giving positive benefits to make sure that the birth rate increases. What are they doing in the UK? What is a Labour government doing in the UK? Shamefully trying to suppress our birth rate. And I challenge any of them to get to their feet and tell me how a 2-child benefit cap helps increase our birth rate in Scotland. Go on. Go on.
Order. Can I remind the honourable gentleman that this is a debate about devolving immigration in Scotland?
OK, right. Let's look at Scotland's population then. Scotland's population is standing probably in the region of 5.5 million. So some estimates 5.43 million, some 5.7, but it's roughly about 5.5 million. We've been in population decline since the later part of the 20th century. It's an issue that particularly interests and excites me to look at this. And in the Scottish Affairs Committee, I think we did 3 reports. I think the Secretary of State served on one of the reports and inquiries we did about Scotland's migration issues, and they were helpful reports, and hopefully it will add to the debate, and I'm glad that a few people have referenced this already, because we got down to the serious of business of trying to do, and I congratulate the previous Blair government. It was visionary when it came to immigration. It was imaginative. Tony Blair opened up Eastern Europe through accession, which helped our issues in Scotland. For a while it reversed our long-term population decline. The Tony Blair government also gave us fresh talent. It gave us an opportunity for people to come to our universities, to study in Scotland at one of our world-class universities, and stay and contribute to the Scottish economy for a period of their early lives. It was fantastic, backed by the UK government, backed by the Scottish government, overwhelming support by honourable members in this House. It was subsumed by a general UK policy which meant that we lost our advantage. But I know that there's something excited and interests the Secretary of State, so I'll give him way chairman fresh talent.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I did sit on the Scottish Affairs Select Committee in one of the reports that the Honourable Gentleman chaired. I think it was in the 15 to 17 Parliament. And I remember one of the recommendations and conclusions from that report on migration and depopulation in Scotland was that the biggest migration out of Scotland was 19 to 26-year-olds to the rest of the UK, and we never answered why.
One of the issues that Scotland's got, and I was going to come on to this, but I think it's good to examine and look at that just now. There's reasons for that. I'm not entirely clear, and we didn't get to the heart of that in our analysis in the Scottish Affairs Committee. But yes, he's right. Because we live in a United Kingdom and we have a massive mega city like London, there's always the attraction and allure for young Scots to come down to London. I did myself. I'm pretty certain the Secretary of State spent a good part of his young life in London. Most Scots at some point find themselves living in London. But it's worse than that for Scotland, because we have a centuries-old historical culture and tradition of emigration. Immigration has not really been that big an issue for us. We do obviously benefit from it, but the key feature in the history of Scotland and the debate about this is emigration. Everybody will know there's Scots communities all around the world, from Canada, New Zealand, United States, everywhere. There's a Scots community that's going to be there. This has always acted as an allure and a draw for our young people. It's not so much now, but like previously, young Scots settled abroad, so we got into this historic cultural trend of people leaving Scotland, and we've got to address that. There's one other thing that we looked at the Scottish Affairs Committee, which we didn't come to any great conclusion about, and that is deindustrialisation and the impact that has on emigration, about why that encourages people to leave. We've obviously got that in Scotland. We only need to look at some of our major cities and some of the difficulties and features of life in these cities to see why people would make that decision to leave. So what we're wrestling with are the problems that UK governments, successive UK governments, have bequeathed Scotland, whether that's through a Brexit policy or whether it's through things like the 2-child benefit cap, mixed with a historical attitude towards immigration and deindustrialisation. These are the issues that we have to wrestle with. These are the things that my honourable friend, in his one-line, very modest bill, invites us to address. He's not got the solution to this bill. He's just said that. It's an open bill. And what happens, and I'm quite surprised at the Secretary of State for not understanding how it works in committee and these type of private members' bill. What my honourable friend is doing is an invitation to the House. I'm laying out the difficulties that we have, and I'm going to get onto demography in a minute. Wait till you hear about demography in Scotland. But we're identifying a difficulty and an issue. What my honourable friend is saying, help us. Work together. We have a real problem in Scotland. Why don't we... There's some fantastic contributions to be made across there. Real depth in analysis. People who understand how to look at critical questions and come up with solutions. Help us. Help us deal with this so that we can address the range of issues that we got. Because believe me, Madam Deputy Speaker, if we don't start to address them, we are going to be in really, really serious trouble. I'll give way to the Honourable Lady, of course.
I've been listening with great interest to the Honourable Gentleman's comments, and there are other countries and ways of doing this without having full devolution for a lot of the reasons that my honourable friend from the Isle of Wight West laid out. And you've had an offer, the Scottish Government had an offer from the Home Secretary to work with the Scottish Government, as was highlighted earlier, to try and to work with the Migration Advisory Committee to provide some of these solutions. Full devolution would be expensive and time-consuming and would not deliver.
See, this is helpful. This is what I think that my honourable friend was hoping for, was positive contributions such as this. Now, if there's a solution that could address our demography, population issues through the Migration Advisory Council, and I'm very much aware of the work it does, and I commend some of the work it does. My view, like what it's done in terms of some of the occupations that's listed for Scotland, is not nearly enough. It doesn't even touch the sides of our difficulties. But if she's got thinking about how that could be beefed up, how that could be made effective, how that could be made more useful, we are all ears. Come on, the committee, help us design, and that's the thing that we need. Positive solutions to identified problems, and that is the territory that we want to get into. So we've got long-term population decline in Scotland, and when I first started getting engaged in this debate in the early 2000s, beginning of the century, there was a real fear at that point that Scotland, for the first time since the 19th century, would drop below the iconic 5 million mark for its population. There was a real fear that that was going to happen. That was only reversed because of the imagination of the previous Labour government and its generosity when it came to immigration policy, something that this would never even think about across there. The vision of Tony Blair about how Europe would work and about how the single market would develop helped Scotland, and it helped us address some of the issues.
Imagine leaving that.
Of course I will.
On that point, around the millennium, I remember hearing Lord Jack McConnell, the First Minister of Scotland at the time, talking about that iconic 5 million mark. Now, I was only 13 or 14 at this point, but I remember it being so important, and so important to Labour, that immigration happened in order to keep that population. Why does he think that Labour have changed their position so drastically in a relatively short space of time? Why is immigration now apparently bad?
I don't know, and that is such a good and profound question. I don't know why they've got themselves into this situation. I suspect it's because of the Reform members who are not here today. I suspect it's some sort of fear of them, and they're probably right to be frightened. I think I saw an opinion poll where they're actually behind reform across the United Kingdom. And I think what they think, not to their credit, but probably which will only exacerbate the problem, they think if they somehow pander to the agenda of reform, that's going to help them beat them. Nothing could delight them more than going on to the agenda of reform. That's why in Scotland we take them on and we tackle. And that was why I was so pleased and impressed by the First Minister of Scotland this week, who put together a summit to take on these very challenges. And I was delighted that the leader of Scottish Labour attended that summit and took it seriously. Because these are the sort of things that you do when you have the challenge from the right. You do not go on to their agenda. That is what they want. You take on their assumptions and you take them on politically and you beat them. That is why the SNP haven't been so impacted and affected by the rise of reform in the United Kingdom, because we take them on. That is why they are starting to experience difficulties at the hands of reform, because they're looking to pander to their agenda and to move on to some of the uncomfortable territory that they raise. You take reform on, you do not pander to them. That is the lesson of history. Yes.
Very grateful to the honourable member for giving way. Look, I know there are many, many people on these benches who are actively in the business of taking on the party from reform. And look, they are absent once again from the chamber today. And that's, I'm not sure whether it's to our detriment or not. But look, I would say this. There are many, many Labour parliamentarians, and I include myself in this, who are proud of the contribution of immigration to our country. We are still going to have net immigration under a Labour government. I am proud of my own constituency, the University of Hertfordshire, of which more than 50% are international students. So look, I'm pleased he praised the leader of the Scottish Labour Party, but please don't mischaracterise the position of us on these benches.
And I no doubt he's absolutely, utterly sincere, and I've listened to several remarks from some of his Labour colleagues. Some of them greatly impressed me and encouraged me to think that there is a little bit of a fight back. I sat on the committee stage of the Asylum and Borders and Immigration Bill. I did not enjoy that for 1 minute. Yeah. What I saw was a range of initiatives and policies which could basically have come from them. It was very much the same sort of theme and trend that immigration was a bad that had to be curbed, that had to be taken on and dealt with. It was never ever seen as something that was a positive. So I encourage Honourable, speak up. Do more of this. Encourage your colleagues to speak out clearly on these issues, because that is what we did. We are in a political crisis, and we are at a juncture in our political culture and history, and we need brave gentlemen like him to stand up there and take it on. And do not listen to his front bench. The Home Secretary has got a particular issue and track record on this, and then he needs to challenge her in the Home Office. Yes, I'll give way.
I'm grateful to the Honourable Member for giving way. He's spoken at great length about the benefits of immigration, and for myself, I'm married to an Eastern European immigrant, so I'm very well aware of the benefits of immigration and feel that they've had a massive benefit to this country. What I'm a bit confused about is how adding an extra layer of red tape and a potential border between England and Scotland improves or makes a difference to what he's just talked about.
Yeah. I was going to reserve that for the later part of my speech, but I'll just get to the point, given that the Honourable Gentleman tempts me to get onto this territory. He's obviously looking for some sort of answers and solutions about how this works. I'll try to explain to him as best as I possibly can about our plans and intentions and where I think this should eventually go. When I was chairing the Scottish Affairs Committee, we were lucky enough to go to Quebec, and we looked at their statewide immigration system. It was fantastic. Go to Montreal, have a look around at the construction. It is a boom city. And it's able to do that because what the Quebec State Parliament has been able to get from the federal government is control over immigration. So what they're able to do is to appeal to Francophile Europe to come to Quebec and think about settling there. They're able then to attract specific skills that is lacking in their state, and it has led to such incredible growth in Quebec, being in charge of their immigration system. Now, that works in Canada. Are we trying to suggest that the most, what do they call it, the most powerful devolved parliament in the world couldn't come up with a system which is similar or even more effective than what we saw in Canada? This is what we can do if we have the imagination. Now, the Honourable Gentleman has asked how would this work. I think I heard somebody talk about border guards and passport controls between Scotland and England. But what happened in the last 10 years is that Scotland acquired significant new powers over taxation. Now, we'll have a debate about taxation at some other point. But the thing is, we have got them. And what that allowed us to do was to set up Revenue Scotland. So all of us from Scotland have a different tax code than everybody else throughout the United Kingdom. Now, what that individual Scottish tax code do is allow us to know where people are living and working. Because obviously, if they've got a tax code, they'll pay taxes in Scotland. So one of the conditions, if we had a Scottish visa, would be if we attract people from out with the United Kingdom to come to Scotland, they will have a Scottish tax code which would allow us to see where they were, to monitor where they were living and working. One of the conditions of coming in is that they would be resident and to work in Scotland, and if they broke the conditions of their entry into Scotland, they would no longer be entitled to a Scottish visa and they would be made illegal. Who on earth would do that? Why on earth would somebody not want to do that? And they have an opportunity to live in Scotland too. So there is practical solutions, like other nations do it. And there is surely, nobody is suggesting that Scotland couldn't put forward a scheme such as this. And they have done it before. We already talked about fresh talent. This Labour government did it before, where they gave Scotland an advantage when it came to immigration, and they could do it again. It was not without the wit of the Scottish nation to ensure that we have an immigration system, we have a specific tax code, and there are now means to do it. The one other thing I want to take on, and I addressed it a little bit, I think, to an intervention. This idea that somehow Scotland doesn't get any migrants from the rest of England, that they don't want to come to Scotland. And this is just utter bunkum and rubbish. And I hope now, after today's debate, this is never going to be raised again, because it's just rubbish. I'll give a few statistics just for people. This is from the National Records of Scotland. In the year leading up to mid-2022, net migration from the rest of Scotland, from the rest of the UK to Scotland, increased to 12,500, up from 8,900 the previous year. The trend continued, with net internal migration rising to 13,900 in the year to June 2023, the last figures, a 21-year high and 39% higher than pre-pandemic levels. Just a minute, I'll just read a quote out to the Honourable, just be patient. People come to Scotland from the rest of the United Kingdom because of our more affordable living costs, things like free university tuition, free personal care, a progressive social contract, and the fact that it's a beautiful and great country to stay. Of course people come to Scotland. Let's knock this on the head. And I don't know if she's got a point about this, but I'm interested to hear what it is.
For giving way. You're mischaracterising what I said. We're not talking about absolute figures. Yes, they have risen, but disproportionately lower than the rest of the UK. And I will, once I find it, and if he lets me give you, I'll quote you directly from the National Records of Scotland.
Oh, sorry. I thought I was going to get the figures. No, we do way beyond our nationals here when it comes to inward migration. So please, let's not have any more of this. Let's just agree that people come to Scotland and we're doing everything possible and we want more people to come. But regardless of how successful we've been in attracting people, we are still into the situation of long-term population decline in Scotland. But that's a population. The demography of Scotland is a bigger horror story, and it's one thing that we really, really need to look at. Now, Scotland has 22% of its population over 65. That's about one of the biggest ratios in the whole of the Western world. For England, for example, I think it's 17% of the population is over 65. Now, we have a birth rate of 1 child for every 3 women. Again, that is one of the worst birth rates in the whole of the industrialised world. Now, I don't need to lecture honourable members about what birth rate means. We need 2 children for every woman just to sustain population at current levels. We are now at 1 child for every 3 women. That cannot be sustainable. And that's what makes their 2-child benefit cap all the more absurd, heinous and callous. They are working contrary to what we need in Scotland to address some of the issues.
And elsewhere in the UK.
Madam Deputy Speaker, we are therefore, given our falling birth rate, entirely dependent upon immigration to keep our population at current levels and maybe to increase it modestly for the prospects of economic growth. And we know we've got a government whose probably one of its few ambitions and commitments that it's sticking to is to cut net migration. That is their absolute and utter mission. They won't even bring forward a youth mobility scheme in all its glory, so because of their concern about the impact on net migration. So Scotland is in fact burdened with an immigration system and a set of government policies that make our situation just so much worse. Why do you think that we consistently call for a devolution of this power? If this is what they're prepared, no Scottish Labour MP has stood up and opposed this. If they're not having to do it, give it to us to allow us to do this. But all over the world, populations, Western industrial countries are facing the difficulties. Now, they've got the powers to do this. We've seen examples in Italy and in Spain, which has a particularly bad birth rate. almost on a par with what Scotland's got. They've got ministries devoted to trying to increase birth rate and do something about the impending crisis that's coming their way. I mean, even in China, population stagnation is beginning to take hold. But the world population stops growing about 2055, and at that point there'll be stagnation before rapid population fall. But it's at the point where that curve starts to bend that we get the stagnation, and that's why nations are addressing the issues that they have. Have a look at Japan. Historically resistant to immigration, Japan is going through a structural economic crisis because of their demography and their population issues. Their population has fallen by 20% in the course, is due to fall by 20% in the next 10 years because of the falling birth rate. They are going to fall from 3rd in the GDP rankings to 10th. This is what awaits the United Kingdom in the course of the next 20 years. Now, they can't look further than the nose in their face. All they're seeing just now is reform, and all they're thinking about is how we take them on, how we beat them. There is no strategic thinking. There is no long-term vision about what do we do towards the end of the century when all of this starts to take place and take hold. Nothing. No imagination. No inquiry. Nothing. This is where we're going. It might blow some of their heads, but towards the end of the century, migrants might be at a premium, and there will be a competition to try and get people into nations around the world. I know that's too much for them to even start to contemplate just now, but this is where we are going. But yet, Madam Deputy Speaker, what it's about for them is curbing migration. What it's about for them is dealing with it as a problem, something that has to be managed. No concession or ground given to anything that might get in the way of the net migration figures. And we are lumbered with it in Scotland. Where we want to move on and deal with our issues, we cannot do this. And we should be in the position where we are able to do it. Now, we have from an honourable friend the support this has in Scotland, and it's no surprise because business organisations and think tanks have seen what's going on. They just need to look at some of our sectors to find out the crisis that there is in practically every sector in our public services. So, of course, they support this. There's even political consensus in the Scottish Parliament that something needs to be done. The only thing is we need the UK government to get on board and to help to do that. Now, we have a bill today that helps us to achieve it. My honourable friend can see this from the outset. It's not a perfect bill, it's a one-line bill, but the invitation is to get it to committee, get the honourable lady, the honourable gentleman from Isle of Wight, colleagues from the Conservative Party, the Liberal Democrats are not here. What we've identified for. And if somebody's telling me that I've got all this wrong, I want to hear from them. I don't want to hear about what the Scottish Government are doing, ferries or whatever. I know you want to talk about that. Yes, I know.
Well, you're animated about that.
See, this is the thing.
You've just woken up. I guess you're ignoring. Woken up.
This is the thing, Madam Deputy Speaker. They do not want to talk about the issues that are important for us in this House. They want to talk about stuff that's in the Scottish Parliament. I don't know if they don't think their MSPs are up to the job. Is that what the case is? Is that why they have to constantly go on about? They've got, is it 50 MSPs, Secretary of State, that you've got up in Scotland? Why don't they do that job? Let us deal with the things that we need to fix out here. But yes, of course, I'll give way to him.
Madam Deputy Speaker, the thing is that immigration's wrapped up in a lot of things that are devolved to the Scottish Parliament. The Scottish Government themselves in Parliament declared a housing emergency. Does the honourable gentleman think that the lack of housing in Scotland has got anything to do with the inability to attract migrants to do the jobs in the places that need to do them?
What I entrust to and I say ever so candidly to this, because I think we're going to have quite a few debates like this in the course of the next few years, that's a matter for the Scottish Parliament to resolve. Now, the honourable gentleman's party is trying to be the government of Scotland next year. They've maybe got imaginative solutions, and what we'll be able to do in the course of the next year is to test his proposals and policies against what we're doing. Now, if people in Scotland are attracted to the Secretary of State's policies and proposals, they'll vote them in. I don't think that's going to happen. And I think in his heart of hearts, he also believes it now. We only need to look at the by-election result last night. So let them deal with it, but let us deal with the things that matter to us, why we are elected to this House. And nothing, Madam Deputy Speaker, is more important to this. If we do not get this fixed out, we are going to have serious issues, structural problems in our public services and our economy. So I appeal to the House, let this go through and then let's all work together to resolve this situation.
I call Tonya and